Welcome to the Re-Entry Archive. Eye in the Sky, a cannabis experience report taken from erowid.org. I'm not by any means a regular cannabis user. I've used it about 12 to 13 times in my life, and I usually tell people that it's not my plant. I say this for several reasons. For one, from the first time I used it, it didn't feel like it was part of me. I know people who smoke cannabis on a daily basis. Some use it as a recreational ally, some as a detrimental escape from nothing in particular. Suffice to say, I've never been an avid user of recreational drugs. However, I've spent the last year or so of my life in a deep fascination with entheogenic plants and experiences. If there were one thing I think I should state here that would have a heavy influence on my experiences with any drug, is that I have an immense respect for all psychoactive substances. I'm not the most experienced tripper out there by any means, but I take comfort in the sense of wonder I get when I think about the things I've already learned and have yet to learn down the road. I found that more times than not, the light of wonder and love of life can take one further than simply using drugs. I try to meditate before I use any of them and get a calm and serene state of being so that I am entering the experience with the most light inside of me as possible. I have a deep respect for all plant teachers. However, I am slightly biased towards cannabis, which I feel obligated to include in this report. Up until this experience, it has been of little spiritual impact to me, though it has had a lot of aesthetic value, and sometimes the line between the two is minimal or non-existent. This could be because I haven't fully allowed myself to experience a full effect of cannabis, but rather have used it as either an experiment in the field or to enjoy life with friends. I don't feel that either of these are negative, but it's not the road I feel is mine to walk down. The experience: set, serene and social, but slightly anxious. Setting: a mountain range. It was a late summer day, and the sun was still in the sky. Me, S, and K had planned on going a walk through the woods. We live in northwestern Nevada, so the woods were probably more like a treesy mountain range rather than the dense and wet Oregon-style forest. I love trees and the outdoors. Kay grew up there, and S was going to move there soon, so a walk through the woods sounded great. Me and Kay drove up there at about 6:30, and S was supposed to meet us there in 10 minutes. At 7, she hadn't showed up, so we called her on her cell phone. It turns out she'd made a mistake on where to meet us, and had been there longer than we had, somewhere else, waiting for us. She drove down with her 2 cousins in the car, and one of them wanted to drive back home because he wasn't up for the walk. He took the car, and S said that the spot she'd been waiting at was much more scenic and away from developmental areas, so we drove out there. I'm not sure where the time went, as the rest of the night is kind of a haze as far as time goes, but I think we arrived at the spot at around 8:30, though it only took us 10 minutes to get there. Now, as stated before, I'm not one to use cannabis much, and I'd probably turn it down more than I join in, because it always ends up being very recreational, with very little spiritual value, and I feel like I've done something wrong. However, we were in the woods, which I loved, and it was feeling like it was going to be a good experience. so I figured this would be the ideal time and place to use it. We all intended on smoking, so we parked the car in a new spot and headed up a trail for about 100 feet. We came to crossroads and couldn't decide which way to go, plus it was getting dark. Kay and I had brought our guitars, but I left mine in the car as I had no strap to carry it around. Anyway, here we were, at the crossroads, me, S, Kay, and S's cousin, and after a short blues riff from Kay to make a song out of which road to take, we chose one. After 50 feet down the road, we realised it would be ridiculous to choose a road before we smoked the cannabis, because we might not remember which way back. We went back to the crossroads, and S filled her glass pipe with the stuff. The amount of cannabis she had can be compared to the size of half a French fry for 4 people. We saw this and paused for a second to wonder what she was thinking, then verbalised this thought. She assured us that it was very strong and was enough for everybody, so she lit it up and hit it. It got passed around the 4 of us for 5 minutes, and she put the rest away and we started talking. I usually have a 2-minute onset to cannabis, and every time it's the same story. I keep telling myself it won't work this time and it's not going to affect me, and it hits me like a sack of bricks, and I eat those thoughts, and I'm surprised by the potency. 10 minutes later, I'm thinking, you know, I hate to sound typical, but it really should have kicked in by now. And as usual, just when I've given up waiting, it kicks in. Some of the things I was experiencing I would consider typical cannabis effects. Like something is different, but it's hard to tell what. This feeling was shortly followed by the screeching halt of normal perception of space and time. For a second, my body carried on its normal functions, like walking, while the way I perceived it slowed down to the point that it was relatable to being underwater. My mind, however, was still working at full speed. This creates the effect that I think most people laugh and smile about when they are on cannabis. Then comes what I would call the most distinctive effect cannabis has on me, which I call the paper doll effect. This is when the entire world takes on an animated quality and appears as though everything is a 2-dimensional object, like paper. Basically, everything looks like paper dolls in a pop-up book. So after all of the aforementioned effects are taking place in the middle of a mountain range trail, when it's getting pretty dark out, we decide to go for a walk down one of the paths. I asked Jay if he's feeling the paper doll effect, and he says no. S says that Jay doesn't usually get very high when he uses cannabis, and Kay said he wasn't very high either. S usually feels higher when she uses cannabis with me, most likely because I'm really goofy when I'm under the influence of it. It rubs off on her and makes her feel a little more loosened up. So we're walking down this trail, and 3 out of 4 of us are musicians. I try Kay's guitar, but my body's lack of ability to follow the mind in adequate time disables me in playing most of what I can normally. I tried freestyle soloing, and it came out as a clump of clumsy, muted notes, similar to a 5-year-old on speed trying to play the same thing. I gave the guitar back to Kay, and would proceed down the ever-darkening dirt road. A minute or so later, Kay exclaims, "This is the road that the devil meets you on to take your soul." like Robert Johnson. We even have a guitar. And he started to run backwards with Jay. A bit more of this kind of nonsense happened, and then we started to head back. The walk back to the car was kind of frightening, as the road seemed much longer, and I was starting to get paranoid. I'd just seen the movie The Village, and so had S, who was making eerie comments about how those creatures could be in these woods. We got back to the car and pulled a futon out of the back of Kay's car, and we laid it out in the open field, then pine needles and weeds. This is when it started to get weird for Cannabis. While Kay was off walking around and playing guitar, S and J were laying on the futon and looking up at the stars. These weren't city stars like you see from downtown. This was out in the middle of the woods type stars. When I focused on the brightest ones, all the others would start to connect, take on the form of metal jacks, spiralling towards the centre of the universe, which was the star I was looking at. Kay said, "If you look at the sky and hold really still, can you see it move over us?" So we held really still, and sure enough, we saw the sky move over us. It wasn't like something was flying up over there. It was like we were being so still, we could witness the cycle of day and night, watching the sky spin on its axis. Then I would look at one spot in the sky, and I would all of a sudden be looking at an eye, staring right down at me. Then a spider web fractal started spinning towards the eye. I told Jay, and he focused for a second and saw it too. And then S heard us, and saw it also. The fractal changed constantly from spider webs, to video game style 3D cubes, to puzzle pieces to eyes. When it changed to eyes, that's when it really hit me. Like, Cannabis has never had this psychedelic effect on me before. The eye in the sky took on a whole tunnel that led up to the heavens. It was exactly like the DMT art I've seen. The eye was like there was a tear in the fabric of the heavens, and the eye was peeping through. It was female, and very pretty. I sat up and looked at Kay's car, and the fractal persisted. I could see the 3D block fractal pouring into the tyre area of his car, because that was the darkest part of his car to look at. The cubes were pink and red and blue and green, but very light in colour, very similar to the colour to blips, as people call them, as a common effect of psilocybin mushrooms. After about another hour of this sky wonder, we decided to drive back into town. This was around 10 PM. That night I slept really well. This all happened yesterday, so I still have a fairly clear concept of what happened. Conclusion. This was by far the most psychedelic experience I've ever had with Cannabis. I highly doubt that it was laced with anything. You cannot lace Cannabis with any drug of that effect. I've never used PCP, but I imagine PCP laced Cannabis would be much more disorientating and delirious. Now, I haven't completely ruled out that idea that J and S saw the visions I did, because I told them to look for them, and they were placebo effect. Maybe that's half of it. I believe, however, that psychedelic drugs open the doors of the mind, and we experience and perceive things that we are usually shut off to. This would explain why DMT visions are so alike. It is possible, depending on what you personally believe, that all of us walk through the open doors in our minds at night and experience something of another dimension, as our minds and spirits caught a glimpse of a different reality. I've never known this to be particularly true with Cannabis, but this experience shook that ground. In any event, I feel like what we experienced was real, and I'm grateful for it, even though I still woke the next morning feeling as though I'd done something wrong. That was always the missing link with Cannabis. I usually feel like I've misused it, or like I've used it selfishly, but this is probably an effect of my over self-analysis constant strive to do the right thing, be the purest person I can be, even though, ironically, I believe that right and wrong is a fallacy, and all things in existence are really just one. Earth being one big ball of matter and complexly designed life, each grain of sand on the beach taking their own route to the same place. You don't have to have lived through an experience to learn from it. So let's take a few moments to reflect upon what this journey might mean.